gang shit. That's all I'm on. Greetings. Today, we're going to be listening to Tucker talk with Vivek Ramaswamy. If you have highly developed glute muscles like myself and you're pissed off at the system, this is someone that I think that you should pay attention to. He understands that the whole system is full of corruption, and he's talking about revolution, which is a lot closer to what I believe that we need than a lot of other politicians are talking about. The first thing I'm going to start off with is say that we can do this without a new president. We can do this without any elected officials. If we really are pissed off and we want change, the next time everyone comes up for election, you vote out the incumbent across the board. You get rid of every single elected politician in America and replace them with the person running on the other side. Once you've sent that message, we demand that money is taken out of the election system so that regular people with regular voices and regular ideas and sane brains can be put in leadership positions without being beholden to billionaires in order to fund a campaign, because that compromises them right off the bat. We also need to talk with each other. We need to stop waiting for politicians to send messages out to the masses. You can be brave and speak your truth, speak your beliefs, not be silent anymore, not just go along because it's too hard and the backlash is too threatening. You lose your job, your family get attacked. If you care about, I don't care about the border. I don't care about this land. I care about the people in it. I care about the lives that we have built here. This is not about some border war. This is about people. This is about us. And the only way that we're going to get true change is to do sweeping reforms in the government. So you kill the corporate control after you get rid of all these politicians. You kill the corporate control by removing the money. Because right now the corporate interests and billionaire individuals run the whole system. They have captured individuals in seats of power because these people need their money. So they don't need my money. They don't really need my vote that much either. So, as it stands, corporations have captured the government. The government is full of corrupt people that only care about money. And on Main Street, they are sowing chaos so that we can't talk to each other. They're sowing division so that we can't unite and do anything together. So we need to, this is a multi-pronged attack, and it doesn't stop with the president. I mean, you've seen Biden sit in office clueless as to what's going on, eating ice cream and pudding. His cabinet and the rest of the government is handling this perpetuation of the agenda that's taking away your freedoms, that's messing up your kids, that's forcing things down your throat that you don't want. They're ruining the idea of morality and virtue and principles and telling you that you're a bigot if you have any for yourself. You need to just adopt the principles that you're told to believe in. And if you don't, you will be smashed by the mob. So they've created an environment of fear, and a lot of people are afraid to speak. But if you really want change, stop voting for people. Stop hoping that the president's going to fix this. The president is only one man. Even if we elect someone who is viciously and aggressively going to pursue change in this government, we need to help them by removing the obstacles, which are multi-term representatives in the House of Representatives or Congress and the Senate. And even down into the state levels, you see what's going on with the DA in Georgia. You have corruption at all levels that's been funded by corporate money. I'm just kind of mad. You know, this is frustrating. YouTube is censoring everything. A lot of other platforms are censoring everything. It makes it seem like we're all divided. The truth is that the majority of Americans are mad about this. And it's time that we do something. We can't keep putting our faith in other people. Trump tried, but everybody stonewalled him, and he had to cooperate with Republicans before he could even get anything done. There's corruption in the red and blue party. It's a uniparty. All they care about is money. None of them care about you. Now, this guy sounds great. If he's not full of shit, he's talking about revolution, he's talking about cleaning house, we got to help him do it because he's only one man, but I love what he's talking about. So let's jump into it and hear what he's got to say.
The government absolutely lied to us. The 9/11 Commission lied. The FBI lied. There's a federal case of victims on 9/11 that want accountability. I don't think they would have come for me if this was false. What do we know about Hunter Biden's dealings? What do we know about the truth of what happened on January 6th? What do we know about that Nashville shooter manifesto? Yes, we can handle the truth. Just give me the hard truth.
It feels like we're on the cusp of chaos.
Oh, there's something going on. I mean, I think we're like in a 1776 moment in this country. We are driving Russia further into China's arms as we arm Ukraine, further strengthening what I see as the single greatest military threat. We are dependent on a tiny island nation off the southeast coast of China for our entire modern way of life. I will not send our sons and daughters to die over somebody else's nationalistic dispute. End the Ukraine war, reduce our economic dependence on China, weaken the Russia-China alliance.
I'm not sure what is controversial about any of that. They're a dumber group than the foreign policy Republicans. Where are we now?
There's a deeper void and vacuum that we have to fill with an affirmative alternative vision of our own, and that takes courage.
The first Republican debate of the season is less than a week away. It's next Wednesday in Milwaukee. We have no idea what's going to happen there, of course. But one prediction we can confidently make is that a man called Vivek Ramaswamy is likely to make an impression, a political outsider with a complicated name who is unaccountably rising in the polls. Who is this guy? Is he a BS artist? Is he for real? We just sat down with him for an hour and found him one of the best versed voices in policy we talked to in a long time. That was a surprise. This is a conversation worth watching. Here it is. Vivek, thanks for joining us.
Listen, I want to address the fact that I'm sitting in the middle of the screen. I keep getting auto strikes and videos blocked and or partially blocked because the automated system scans for footage and audio, and if they match up too much, then you get struck. So I apologize if you guys want to see the unobstructed view, but it just keeps, ruining the uploads, at least on the YouTube side. So I hope that staring at my ugly face is tolerable. I promise it will be worth it, or it might not be. I shouldn't promise stuff I can't deliver on. That's ridiculous. Never mind. This is going to be terrible. Let's set the expectations low, and then any sort of surprises are in the positive direction. You're going to be like, wow, this wasn't as bad as it was billed as, So let's start off on that foot.
Good to be here. So you, the other day, made a comment about 9/11 in which you suggested that the U.S. government had not been wholly forthcoming about what happened that day, that there had been lying the federal bureaucracy.
Oh man, I saw CCTV footage of a wingless. I think it was on X, and I tried to find it again, and I don't know what happened to it. But a wingless, very close to looking like a missile, go into the Pentagon, and this was the camera that was missing this whole time. Not only that, you had towers 1 and 2, right? They fell down. 7 hours later, Building 7, which was a 47-story structure, about a third the height of the others, with some low-grade fires inside of it, fell down at free fall speed. Then the building owner was caught on TV saying that we pulled it. I pulled this stuff up on one of the earlier podcasts. Off the tip of my tongue, I don't remember which one, but this is crazy that this guy hasn't forgotten all about it. Even most Americans have forgotten about this shit. And I am still pissed about the Kennedy assassination not being released. If the UFO shit is true, and they've been hiding that this whole time, then I want everybody who says that the government can't keep a secret to shut the fuck up. Because they definitely can. We still don't know what's going on with Kennedy. If aliens are real, that's another crock of crap. And then you got the Lusitania. That's how we got into World War II. The Germans took out a full-page ad in the New York Times saying ships will be sunk if they leave and go for England. We let them go. Then we got into the war. The Gulf of Tonkin incident, which turned out to be fake, was how we got into Vietnam. The government just keeps lying, keeps fabricating things to get you fearful enough to comply. I mean, look at how we got into Iraq. Weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist, right? That's how we justified it. And then once we're in, we're like, well, we're staying. We can't pull out now. It's too late. So let's stay here for 10 years. Man, I love this guy already, just the fact that he mentioned that.
That seems obviously true. The response was unbelievable. It was immediate. You were attacked as a conspiracy monger, as a lunatic, but not just by the left, also by the goons at the Wall Street Journal editorial page. Wrote a whole piece about how you disqualified yourself by even asking that question. What were you saying, and why was the reaction as fierce as it was, do you think?
It was fascinating, Tucker. I've had many of these moments in the campaign where they said, this is the campaign ender. This is over. He just blew it. This is one of them. So this is like the fourth or fifth of those. But what was interesting about it was, right, this was not a left-wing chorus, right? This was mostly actually a right-leaning chorus. And Mike Pence, and he was deeply disappointed. Chris Murphy, this Democratic senator guy, says something very similar to Mike Pence. And so
you hear the same fucking names over and over, and I'm so sick of hearing these fucking names. When I say we vote all the incumbents out, I fucking mean it. Even if you vote some fucking wingnut in there, at least they're not prepared and settled. You're creating chaos. You're creating division. You're shaking the system up. You're ruining the carefully crafted little machine that they've got, where if anybody steps out of line, you've got this ready-to-go mob with their speeches already written to come out and shit on people that start talking about real shit. So get rid of the first group, and then the second time around, we can be a little bit more selective and actually select people. But I'm so serious when I say that we need to just vote every single sitting politician in America, all the way from local, city, town governments to state governments to the federal level, get them all out. Boom, get them out. And don't give them their coat.
So it's fascinating. It says there's something going on here. So in fairness, Tucker, I didn't suggest it. I explicitly said that the government absolutely lied to us. The 9/11 Commission lied. The FBI lied. Now, is this a core point of my campaign? No, it's not. I actually went on a comedy show where some guy asked me, was the moon landing fake? I said, I think it was real. Then he asked me, did the government tell us the truth about 9/11? I said, no, they did not. So in response to a question, I'm going to answer honestly.
Yeah.
And the thing I had in mind was the facts. There's this guy, Al Bayoumi. Now, rewind back to 9/11 and the pre-9/11 day. Think of how ludicrous this story is. A 42-year-old graduate student, and there's nothing wrong with being 42 and going back to school. My dad went back to school much later in life, but he's a 42-year-old graduate student who receives the two of the terrorists who flew planes into buildings in the United States of America not that long later, receives them at the airport in LA, takes them to his house, spends lots of time with them, integrates them into the community. But the account for what he said happened was he met them randomly at the airport. That doesn't make much sense on the face of it.
Kind of happened to be at LAX and
no, exactly.
You guys from
and
Saudi.
Hey, you know, you look like guys we might get along with, and then suddenly become fast friends at the airport, so much so that he takes them up. So it's a little suspicious. But hey, the 9/11 Commission and the FBI looked into it, and at the time they said his account is accurate.
Yeah, it sounds legit.
It sounds super legit, right? Now, there was some
hanging out at LAX.
You know, these guys came from Saudi Arabia. Does this guy who received them have any ties to Saudi Arabia? That's where they landed. But now, 20 years later, in 2021 and 2022, the FBI quietly declassifies documents. And they have to, 20 years later is the deadline. That suggests that, oh, wait a minute. They did know, actually, that this guy was a Saudi intelligence operative. Interesting how that works. Just slips that right under there 20 years later. Now, there are real consequences for this right now because there's a federal case of families of victims on 9/11 that want accountability, that are determining answers. So they're suing the Saudi government. And the case turns on whether or not this is true. Because you know those attackers were from Saudi Arabia. The Bush administration, you'd have the 9/11 Commission, bipartisan. You have the fact of the FBI, CIA, everybody saying that, no, this guy was really just acting independently here. But now we say is a Saudi intelligence operative. There's really the question of whether the Saudi Arabia owes damages to these families. So this is a relevant question. So Is this the main point I'm focused on in my campaign? No, I'm not. We have to focus on the future of the country. But if I'm asked a question and I answer honestly based on the facts, I don't think they would have come for me if this was false, if this was ludicrous.
Of course.
Yeah, let's take a look. You know, I'm so sick of the lies, so let's just let's see it.
They were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire.
So this is the building
I
owner.
remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they
Man, I am. There we go.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
Pull it. Look at that. Does that look like a natural collapse? No, it does not. Buildings do not collapse into their own footprint when they're asymmetrically damaged. Only when they're perfectly damaged in a controlled manner. This is why we do it this way. We damage all 4 support columns, or however many support columns, symmetrically, floor by floor, milliseconds between floors. So you start at the bottom, you blow the bottom out from underneath it, the next floor incrementally detonates fractional second later, and you literally cut 50 stories or whatever you got, and it free falls. Boom, just like that. A normal collapse is asymmetrical. One side gets weaker, even the towers, right? You asymmetrically damage them, and if one had fallen down in its own footprint, 100 and something stories, that would have been shocking. But the fact that they both perfectly fell down, you saw huge plumes of outward pressure before the building was really collapsing. The first thing you saw was just this big cloud, like an explosion. Firefighters on the ground said that they felt explosions under their feet in the ground when this was happening. That's and then this is an article, World Trade Center 7 building did not collapse due to fire. This is a report from engineers and architects demanding that the American National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, retract and correct a 2008 report that concluded 1 of 3 World Trade Center buildings collapsed due to weakened because fire weakened the steel. So we had an argument about whether jet fuel melts steel beams. Building 7 had nothing happen to it. It was an office building. There were some low-grade fires from carpeting, curtains, and paperwork. Carpeting, curtains, and paperwork certainly don't melt steel beams if jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams. And this is what the conclusion of the officials is right here. It was around, it's 47 stories tall, clad in granite masonry. Debris ignited fires on multiple lower floors. Supposedly collapse began when a column buckled. The collapse made the old 7 World Trade Center the first steel skyscraper known to have collapsed primarily due to uncontrolled fires, and this was the official conclusion. So again, no structural damage to it, some low-grade fires, and it collapses like that in its own footprint, perfect, just like a demolition, and at free fall speeds. And then they put out this horse shit, and we're supposed to believe it. Absolutely crazy.
Lying is never punished.
Lying is never punished, but it's speaking the truths you're not supposed to speak.
Yep.
That's what actually attracts the immune response, the anaphylaxis.
But why? I mean, you made I thought, a really wonderful point in one of your responses to this, in which you said it's not okay for the government to lie to us, period, in a democracy. It's poison, and it corrodes the system that we revere, democracy. So, but why would the Wall Street Journal take time out of its busy schedule of defending low capital gains taxes to attack you over this?
You know, what's interesting is I think that there's a bipartisan consensus in this country right now that we, the people, we can't handle the truth.
Yeah.
It's like Jack Nicholson at the end of the movie, right?
Yes.
You can't handle the truth. You need me on that wall. My view, my basic view in this campaign is no, we don't need you on that wall. And yes, we can handle the truth. COVID-19, what was the origin? What did we know about the vaccines before we mandated them? What did we know about Hunter Biden's dealings before we systematically suppressed that story? What do we know about the truth of what happened on January 6th? What do we know about that Nashville shooter manifesto, the transgender individual who shot up a bunch of people in a Christian school? That's why I went to Nashville.
Who cares what we know about the shooter? I'm so sick of blaming the guns and blaming some sort of racial agenda or someone who just is a gun nut. The real issue is there's a lot of desperate Americans out there, and some of them are committing suicide because they've given up hope and they just there's no future here for me. Other people get angry, and instead of just committing suicide, they're so pissed off at the system and the corruption and the lack of access to the American dream and the murdering of the middle class and these crazy agendas that are corrupting the children and the young adults in the country and completely demoralizing most normal Americans who want freedom and prosperity for all, when all you get is division and arguments and separation because the leadership is going as far away from each other as possible and dragging us with them, when we should all be center. We should leave them the fuck behind and come back to center and talk to other Americans. This is maddening. It is madness. The fact that anytime someone has something reasonable to say, the system attacks and suppresses rational, logical thought.
Not that long ago, because Bill Lee, a Republican governor of Tennessee, now wants to pass a red flag law in Tennessee without releasing that manifesto. The whole point is the public can't handle the truth. And so I had offline discussions. I mean, we're talking with, big donors in the Republican Party, big folks in media, executives and otherwise, who said, hey, listen, okay, even if what you're saying is true, this is not helping you. You say, why is that the first question that should go through my mind, right? I mean,
oh my God. So many people are so worried. You shouldn't speak freely. They said this to Elon Musk too. They were like, you're going to lose money if you keep saying stuff that's not popular. And he said, I don't care if everybody agrees. If the consequence of me speaking my mind and having free speech is losing money, then so be it. Nothing has fundamentally changed about the process of gun ownership, the fact that Americans own guns. Nothing has fundamentally changed about guns in a very long time either. The only thing that has changed since these shootings have started to become on the rise is the decline of mental health, the decline of the ability for Americans to speak to each other, the decline of unity and patriotism and love in this country is what is driving these mass shootings. And anyone who wants to just stick their head in the sand and listen to these politicians bicker about banning your guns, that is the gateway drug to taking away your speech for real. That's the only thing stopping them from going much farther. You see some of the draconian crap that's going on in countries that don't have the Second Amendment. They're just waiting for the right opportunity. And in some of this, it could be sponsored terrorism, funded terrorism by unknown actors. Maybe they're being paid to do something very bad. I don't know. But I know one thing, and it is not the gun's fault, and it is not some sort of manifesto. It's desperation and anger being manifested as a result of the conditions in this country. And I'm so done with the endless 4-year discussion cycle of like, oh, are we going to ban guns this time? Can we shut up? We're not going to ban guns in America.
Personally, I think the way I'm running this campaign is I'm not thinking about what's helping me or not before I say it. So far, at least that approach does seem to be helping me.
Yes.
We're doing all right. But even if I weren't, I'd rather lose some election than to play some political snakes and ladders of what we're supposed to say.
Thank you.
And I think that that's really one of the questions at issue today, as it was in 1776. Do we believe that the public can be trusted with the truth? Whatever the truth is, just give me the hard truth. I mean, I have a friend of mine, her father died recently. She talked about actually her experience of her father having heart attacks even when she was a kid. He went on to live as far as he did. But she said the one thing she just wanted from the doctors, from her dad, etc., is, she's 12 years old at the time. I can handle the truth. Just tell me, like, is my dad going to die? Is my dad likely to die before he goes in for the next procedure? Don't just tell me he's going to live because you think that's what I need to hear. Just tell me the truth and I can handle the truth. I think most of us are this way. I think we as free human beings, what makes us human beings and not animals is the belief that we can believe in something bigger than ourselves and that we can handle the truth from those who are in power. And I think that's the moment we live in today.
We can handle the truth, period. And the other huge issue with us being able to communicate is fact checking and content moderation and all this curation of the online world. The real world's messy, and these online platforms are getting so sanitized and so happy, everything's perfect, nobody's arguing here, because we're only presenting one side. So you go on there and you're watching this stuff and you're like, man, am I crazy? Am I the only one that is not willing to go along with this and just bend the knee? And the truth is that there's a lot of people that are not. It's just a matter of us finding each other and organizing. I mean, if people in the Arab Middle Eastern world were able to do this, in order to overthrow dictators, we can do it here, as long as we can find a platform that is not going to censor communication to the point where you can't even have a real conversation. And if that is the case, then we need to go outside the system. We did it for a very long time. We are not beholden to these tech companies. In fact, we could stop using their shit and be totally fine. I grew up in a time when I didn't have a cell phone in my pocket, and I was happier than I am now, by far. I had more human connections. I was spending time with friends in real life. Now everybody, even when you're with them, is so distracted by this device that connects them to the rest of the world, they're never fully present in the room with you.
It was the moment of the American Revolution that we, the people, can be trusted. And I think we now live in a moment where the government, and not just the government, but a broader establishment in our country, believes that citizens of this nation cannot be trusted with the truth.
So when you describe the way that people who run the country feel about voters, you're describing the way parents treat small children.
That's right. That's right. I think that's actually worth understanding, because there's one school of thought that says the government and the people in charge are fundamentally hostile to the people. If only it were so easy, actually. I think the reality of what's going on is far more dangerous, where the people who are in charge have actually what they think of as a benevolent view of the people. We're doing what's actually right for you, for me, for the
ultimate narcissist. Most politicians are this way, believe it or not. They believe that they can run things better than you could run your whole life, and they should be in charge of not just themselves, but you and everybody else. And I mean, clearly that's the type of person that's going to get into a political position. The danger is they believe it so deeply that they discount your views altogether. They don't care at all. And this is also sociopathic behavior. If you look at other humans as being subhuman, basically, to the point where their criticism of you matters not at all, because you're like, they don't know anything. They are so ignorant and lost. I'm right and they're always wrong. You don't want people like that in there, because these are the ones that are lying to us, because they know that we're too stupid and weak to hear any sort of truth. We can only hear the lies that they allow us to hear, because we're a bit gentler. We're not prepared. We don't have the equipment to deal with the truth. You can't handle the truth.
Populace at large. And then if you look at this throughout history, Tucker, for most of human history, that's how it's been done. For most of human history, before 1776 in the old world, the vision was the people cannot be trusted to sort out their own differences. One person, one vote? That's such a laughable idea. It has to be church leaders and labor leaders and business leaders that decide in the back of palace halls what's right for the rest of society at large. And then we had this weird departure in 1776 that said, no. Actually, we the people can be trusted in a system where every person's voice and vote counts equally, with free speech and open debate in the public square, whatever it is. Sometimes we might get it wrong. Sometimes we get it right. But whatever it is, that's the way we do things in this new thing we call the United States of America. But then every once in a while, and when one of those moments, that ugly monster rears its head again that says, no. The people can't be trusted. It has to be now in the back of palace halls, in the back of three-letter government agencies in Washington, D.C. or in the back of BlackRock's corner office on Park Avenue in Manhattan, wherever it is. It's that the enlightened have to make sure that the public is protected from the truth, just like a parent protects a child. And I think it's that parental instinct. It's not the kidnapper's instinct, right? It's not the guy who wants to, kidnap and kill the child. No, it's actually almost what they think of as being the instinct of a parent who's doing for you what's better for you than you know for yourself. And I think that's what gives it actual staying power, because it's not what somebody thinks of as evil who's committing evil. They think of it as actually a moral obligation to the public, which explains the bipartisan nature of when somebody speaks the truth about what really happened on 9/11. No, hush, keep that under the rug, because Republican or Democrat, we know that the people can't be trusted for that. It's not good for the people.
The children are listening. Lower your voice.
The kids are listening.
Yeah. Do you get the sense as you travel the country, talk to people, speak, that we're on it feels like we're on the cusp of chaos?
I think we're on the cusp of something. I'd like to think of it as a revolution, in a positive sense of that word. I think that, I try to be an optimist at times.
But you do feel like this is...
Oh, there's something going on.
Yeah.
I think we're like in a 1775, spring of 1776 moment in this country, actually. I think that people are hungry. Now, the form I want to see it play out in is reviving those shared ideals that unite us, that set the nation into motion in 1776, that I think are innate to our nature as human beings, as Americans. I think that there's a hunger for a revival of those ideals. That's where we are. But there's a lot of ways that energy could go. The way I would like to play my small role in helping channel that energy, it's not all going to be done by the U.S. president, but there's a role to play, is to channel that energy towards a positive revival of that which unites us across our diverse attributes or divides. But if it doesn't go that way, there's a dam that's going to break and the river's going to go somewhere. I hope it leads towards a national revival rather than, other places where this could go.
How concerned are you about a real economic reset in the next year?
Quite concerned. I think that 2024 is going to be a year where it's not going to take a lot of guts for me to make this prediction, because I'll tell you why it's easy to make. We're on the cusp of a major economic downturn next year. We live under conditions of a deeply inverted yield curve. I mean, these are topics that may put people to sleep, and so we don't have to
Can you explain
get
what
into
means?
it. Yeah, I mean, it's basically you would expect in the long run, right? Long run interest rates on long run bonds are higher compared to interest rates on short run bonds, because there would be higher risk of being repaid back. That's how things are supposed to work. There are a wide range of factors that can occasionally cause that to tilt in the other direction. We're in one of those conditions right now, where the interest rates on short-term bonds are significantly higher than they are on long-run bonds. And every time that's happened in the last 40 years, that has predicted a recession that followed in the year or so that came later. And there's lots of complicated reasons for why, and economists can debate it. But what's not debatable is that that's exactly what happens. That's where we are now, which is why I think in the calm before the storm, Biden will put up low unemployment numbers. Well, that misses the point that we have a deeper structural deficiency, where our real problem is there are twice as many jobs open as there are people looking for work.
Right.
That's the actual deeper structural failure as it relates to the labor market.
People have stopped looking for work.
People have stopped looking for work. Absolutely. I mean, people are being paid more, or have been habituated more to staying at home than to go to work. People also don't have the skill sets required to actually show up to work, because they have four-year college degrees that were subsidized by the U.S. Department of Education, without actually having the skill sets that many employers badly need in order to grow their business, whether it's a big business or a small one. The inflation numbers, they'll point to saying, hey, the rate of inflation's coming down. Inflation's cumulative. Things are still 16, 20% more expensive than they were in 2020, and wages have not gone up in the same way over the same period.
20% inflation, and that's reported numbers, so you probably can add at least 30% to that. So like 25, maybe 30% real inflation in 3 years since we started printing money. This is a big deal, and we're only kicking the can down the road. If we'd taken the pain, the financial pain that occurred with the actual downturn when everything shut down, we wouldn't be in this situation. But now we have to raise interest rates and slow everything down because we printed all this money and we threw it on the fire. So now the fire is running too hot. Now we're dumping water on the fire, And the thought is to dump just enough water on the fire to bring it back down to where we want it. But we've printed so much money that it would just flare back up again as soon as you lowered interest rates. So they're going to have to keep interest rates high for a sustained period of time, which is going to make people very adverse to selling their homes. So you're not going to be able to buy a home. The housing inventory is going to be very low. It's going to be very expensive to buy because of the restricted inventory. And your mortgage payments are going to be exceptionally high if you're locking yourself into an 8 or 9% mortgage. A $300,000 home under 3% interest rates is about $1,100 a month payment. The same home under the current interest rates with the same down payment requires $1,800 a month for exactly the same. You're getting the same thing, $700 a month more expensive, and that's all interest. It's just going to the bank. It's not paying off your equity. It's not paying for your property taxes. It's not doing anything. It's just feeding the banks more money. So they're loving it. But for us, they're cooling the economy down on purpose, and probably, unless they can thread the needle, which is nearly impossible, we got a 1% chance of that, and we have a much higher chance of them either curbing interest rates too quickly, which would lead to higher inflation and could get out of control and make everything, so expensive we could get hyperinflation if they do that. So they're going to err on the side of caution and keep interest rates higher for longer, which is definitely going to lead us into a recession, depression. Everything's going to slow down. Companies and individuals are not going to be seeking loans under these interest rate conditions.
And so there are deep structural issues with our economy. I mean, the national debt, interest payments are going to be the biggest portion and line item of the federal budget very soon. But I think that short-term numbers that we look at right now belie the reality that we're going to have a reckoning. I think that reckoning is likely going to, the timing of these things is hard to predict, but I think that likely reckoning 2024 could be a pretty good prediction for when that's coming.
But that's not just an economic story. I mean, people have psychologically, I think, a very hard time moving backward.
Yes.
Right? It's one thing to be poor. It's another thing to be poor having been rich.
Yes.
Very hard for people to metabolize that.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that happens to hundreds of millions of people at the same time, people get radical.
Especially against the backdrop of already having deep distrust.
Right.
In my opinion, appropriately deep distrust in our existing institutions, including the government in this country. And so I think there are two ways this could break. Right? Sometimes you go through hardship and you're strengthened by that hardship. I'm just thinking about it as an individual in my life. Like, I've gone through a hardship in my life. My father's been through hardship. In each of those cases, that led us to become stronger for having gone through that and did things that we otherwise would have never done, created things in the world that otherwise would have never existed. And that's the positive version of this. And it's the version I want to see for our country. But there's a very different way this could break, too. I think that if we don't channel that frustration in a direction that creates something anew, right, a sort of reincarnation of our American experiment, which is what's going to be required, then I think this ends the way that many other revolutions do, is not the creative kind, but the destructive kind. And I think the economic collapse that I think, calamity that I think, recession at least that's coming, could just be the catalyst. We'll blame it on, that'll be the final match that's lit, but it's the kerosene on the floor that we have to pay attention to in the meantime. And that's why I think when people ask me, are you a culture issues guy, or are you an economy guy, or are you focused on foreign policy? It's missing the point. These things are each symptoms of a deeper
They're
place.
of a piece. There's no doubt.
No doubt about it.
Oh, big picture guy. I love it. Most politicians break things down into incremental little compartmentalized things like they're not connected. It's all part of one big picture. And they try to divide the issues up. I mean, it makes no sense the way things are split. One side wants to kill prisoners and save babies, and the other side wants to murder prisoners. Or wait, one side is anti-abortion and pro-capital punishment, and the other side is pro-abortion and anti-capital punishment. If you want to kill people, you should be pro-abortion and pro-killing criminals. And if you don't believe in murder, then you should believe in neither. I mean, that's just my opinion. I know that's not popular and it doesn't fit in the nice little box that everybody's used to being in, but it makes no sense. If you want big government but you don't want to go to war, how are you going to justify big government? You've got parties they're just so mentally confused. There's not like a big picture of like, hey, this doesn't make sense. We address issues individually and then vote as a party. That's the stupidest way that you could possibly do it. Either fully address issues individually and make decisions on exactly what you believe in each of these issues that you care about, or just vote party lines, but don't try to make it make sense. The only way you can make it make sense is if you stop just blindly following the agenda that's being set by the politicians, and you're being told what to think, and part of it is just confusion. This is intentional. The confusion, the lies, the deception, the keeping you busy with fighting your fellow Americans. This is all fully intentional. And this is why we need to introduce the same chaos that they give to us in the streets into the House of Representatives and break this cabal up. That's the only way to do this. You just have to clean the whole place out. It's all rotten. All of it. Even if there are a couple good ones in there, you can't separate the dead wood from the good wood. So you just clear cut.
So you said something when I saw you in Iowa earlier this summer. You said something really, really interesting about donors. And you are an interesting figure because you're effectively from the donor class. You're a rich guy running for president. Now you're dealing with donors from the other side. Mm-hmm. And you said that your views on Ukraine had given a lot of them pause.
Yes. There's no doubt that I have lost otherwise willing and interested donors or potential mega donors to my campaign over my position on Ukraine, which is fascinating. Because I don't think there's any particular self-interest at issue. It's not like somebody saying, oh, well, I own, a big chunk of Raytheon or something like that, and I'm going to have my interests harmed. Therefore, I'm not going to back you because that will harm my self-interest. That'd be an easy and fun and facile explanation, but that's not what's going on. I think there is a deeper bipartisan institutional consensus, the same consensus that said we can't be told the truth about 9/11, that effectively says that we can't confront some of the same facts about Ukraine. And I try not to be reactive, Tucker, because it is a natural impulse where,
of course,
at least the way I'm wired is, if somebody tells you not to do something, there's almost a natural temptation to go in that direction.
Right.
Uh-huh.
So I would like to think, and I believe my position here is grounded in fact and not that reactive emotion, but it's interesting that it makes me doubly committed to making sure that I'm really speaking the truth about what's going on here, at least because it means that the rest of the field absolutely is not, right? I mean, the rest of
that's kind of
the entire
question.
Republican field, not one of, Donald Trump, we could say he wants to end the war, he hasn't said exactly how, but save for Trump, right? Nobody on the debate stage, certainly for the Republican Party, has a principled position on Ukraine, partly because they understand those are the directions they've been given.
So you think it's interesting because there are a couple of fairly smart, and I know them, people running for president right now in the Republican field whose positions on Ukraine are like idiotic.
Or indiscernible.
Right. They don't even make sense.
Some are idiotic.
Let's just summarize. We agreed with Stalin that we would never push NATO past a certain border, and Ukraine is beyond it. So we're going back on a promise that we made to that country when it had different leadership. I guarantee the decision was made, oh, Vladimir Putin won't do shit. We're going to push in, and if the consequence is that all NATO responds, he's not going to do anything. Well, Vladimir heard this was happening, and he went into the country and said, no, I'm not waiting for this to fully actualize. I'm going in first. If you guys are going in, I'm going in first. So we poke the bear. I'm not saying Vladimir Putin is a nice guy or a good guy. I'm just saying that we did initiate this conflict, and we believe that we could push and shove our way in there. And it's not just about Ukraine. I think we're laundering money over there. I think we're buying influence in there to push against Russia and fight against Russia. We're hiding like cowards behind dead Ukrainians. We're just funding them and sending money over there. Some of the money's going toward the war. Some of it's going in people's pockets. Seems like the best way to get rich right now would be to find a way to start a war with Russia and be like a Bin Laden type, where they just give you millions of dollars and a bunch of weapons and turn you loose on America's enemy. But the thing that really shows me what they're about is this could all be avoided, all the bloodshed could be avoided if we would go to the negotiation table and diplomatically resolve this and agree to withdraw our push into Ukraine and say, okay, it's a neutral territory. You will leave if you'll leave. We won't do that. So the people in charge that are supporting this are all warmongers, and the people with the money behind it, who are the donors who want this to continue, are also warmongers, crusading as saviors and peaceful people. But when the cards are down and the money's involved, what do they want? They want war. They won't go to the table to negotiate a settlement for this at all. That says all you need to know. They want war.
The idiotic one is just we have to arm them to the teeth, give them as much money as
Yes.
possible because we stand with Ukraine. The indiscernible ones are the ones where they'll tell you one thing and then they'll tell their donors one thing and then they don't know where they actually stand because they're being buffeted.
But
by
that's
whips.
the effect of donor pressure. Right
It
there.
is. It really is. It really is. Absolutely. I mean, I think that there's, I think there's finger in wind candidates, and I think that that exists. So there's finger in wind candidates on Ukraine.
Which way
but I
is the
think that
wind
there are
blowing? I'll do
also
that.
Separately, candidates who just believe that this is the way that we do things in the United
I love the badge that people put on their profiles. I support the thing that we're supposed to support now. Whatever it is, I support it.
States of America. We don't stop until we have taken down what we have decided is our enemy, forgetting that the USSR doesn't exist anymore and believe that that's the only source of victory. And so, my view, I start from a...
It's crazy, too, because we worked with Russia to defeat the greatest evil humankind has ever known. And then you got people that are championing some of the same ideas that dude had, which was like banning speech, books, censorship, taking away guns. This was the playbook. Look it up. Go read about it. Go watch documentaries. There's hundreds of documentaries on this stuff. How it happened. How did it happen? It's happening right now. Again. So mysterious. How could it happen? How could it happen? Easily. You just have to stop paying attention for a very short amount of time, and it will happen with very little effort. It almost seems like human nature is to just go back into this. Yeah, I think we need war again. Like
different premise, and there's pros and cons, right? On one hand, I don't have national ads running because my super PAC the super PAC affiliated with me is tiny compared to those affiliated with other candidates in this race that have television ads blaring and lifting their numbers up in the polls.
Super
because they're
PAC
buying a
should
bunch of
be
TV ads.
done away with.
The flip side is I'm unconstrained by what I'm able to say. And that allows me to speak truth that a lot of people in this country recognize to be the truth, which is that we have no discernible national interest at issue in Ukraine. The truth is that as much as we will fetishize and debate the 1994 Budapest Memorandum, which the U.S. wrote, UK and Russia were also parties to it with Ukraine, which I believe we have more than fulfilled our obligations. You don't hear a peep about James Baker's 1990 commitment, his not 1 inch commitment to the NATO wouldn't expand 1 inch beyond Germany. No discussion of that. Against the backdrop of the reality that we face, which is we are driving Russia further into China's arms as we arm Ukraine, further strengthening what I see as the single greatest military threat that the United States certainly has faced since World War II. You could make a case that the United States has ever faced if you actually look at where this could be going. And yet we are actually the ones responsible for driving that Russia-China military alliance. And so one of my advantages is that I am not, some people say, well, you don't have foreign policy experience. And I'll say, yes, I don't have foreign policy experience. And that may actually be an advantage in bringing a rational American.
So you're not responsible for the war in Iraq.
Yeah,
and that's a bad thing.
Yeah, well, I think we could debate whether it's a bad thing or not. But if you break the car, you don't turn over the keys to the guy who broke it. That's what I would say. And so, I think that we are on our way to Ukraine turning into another Iraq or another Vietnam all over again. Except this time, I think it could be worse because there's nuclear weapons at issue. There's an alliance with China, an economy that we depend on for our modern way of life that's also at issue. And the irony is, I think a lot of people today believe that somehow world leaders make their decisions by analogy. So Xi Jinping is going to say, oh, well, because Vladimir Putin walked away with a piece of Ukraine that he didn't have, that somehow means that by analogy, I'm going to be judged more favorably if I go after Taiwan and walk away with a piece of Taiwan that I didn't have, when I basically don't think that's how autocrats or any global leader should, or at least does, make decisions. To the contrary, I think what's actually more likely to happen is we're going to put Xi Jinping in a more likely position to go after Taiwan sooner, because he knows that Russia's in his camp, because they're in a more solid alliance.
There's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah, on Taiwan, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
You know how in Die Hard the terrorists know the FBI playbook? Well, China is watching how we're trying to sanction and punish Russia, and they are positioning themselves so that they will be immune to that type of attack, because they know that we don't want to go to war with them, and they know that if they position themselves correctly, they can just go take Taiwan and we probably won't do shit. The same gamble that we played with Russia and lost over Ukraine, they may be willing to play that gamble with Taiwan against us and bet that we're not going to put boots on the ground in Taiwan to greet Chinese soldiers when they come ashore. We're going to blow up the chip factory and we're going to say, nice knowing you, Taiwan. We're not even supposed to say that. We're not supposed to say Taiwan. We're not supposed to recognize them as a country, or China gets mad. And a lot of politicians follow that because they're cowards and because they want Chinese money and Chinese support. And China's our friend, even though China's not our friend. And China is actively working against our interests and making long-term plans to supersede us as the world power. They are making economic alliances all over the world, while we're focused on blowing shit up and fighting with Russia. And again, like you said, they're making Russia squarely against us. So if China did have a conflict against America, who's Russia going to side with this time? Not us. Not after the way that we're behaving, that is for sure.
I mean, I think that that's mostly right. Now, my view is, this is also another heresy that I think have recently managed to cross last night, which is that I think our commitments to go to war in that situation, or to at least even militarily engage in that situation, should change if it's before or after we have semiconductor independence in this country.
Well, yeah.
I mean, I think so.
So
right?
I agree with you completely, but I, for people who aren't following this, explain what you mean.
Yeah. So this is a long history here, but for historical circumstances that are long and unfortunate, we are dependent on a tiny island nation off the southeast coast of China for our entire modern way of life. Right? These lights wouldn't work. The phones in our pockets wouldn't work. These TV screens and cameras wouldn't work if it weren't for leading edge semiconductors that are manufactured by basically one company and a set of companies around them, TSMC on Taiwan, that power our entire modern way of life. That's just a hard fact. How we got here, it's a long story. I think it's sad that we are where we are, but we are where we are. China has two reasons to want to go for Taiwan. Okay, one is a nationalistic reason, which is that back in 1949, they had this complicated civil war. Chiang Kai-shek, went to Taiwan and claimed that that was actually where the real Republic of China was based. And Mao Zedong said, no, it's the Communist Party of China out of Beijing. And for the longest time, actually, the U.S. and the UN recognized actually the real China as being run out of Taipei, but at some point along the way, switched to saying, no, it's actually run out of Beijing. And so there's this nationalistic thing going on that's super complicated history over there. But there's a more modern motivation for Xi Jinping, which is, wait a minute. If I now have control over that island, I have control over the entire United States, because I now have the economic leverage to get to a deal that the U.S. wouldn't have said yes to. And I think what Xi Jinping is going for is the basic deal where he says, I get to make your stuff as long as I get all of your IP and everything else in return. And right now, if he says that to the U.S., we're not going to go for that deal. But if he's squatting on the semiconductor supply chain, well, then that's how we ultimately get to parity, consummate the codependent relationship. And I think that's step one of a broader conquest of the modern West.
How hard would it be to achieve, as you said, semiconductor independence in the United States?
It's not going to be easy, but I'm confident that with focus, I can lead us there by the end of my first term in office. And my basic rule of thumb on this one, Tucker, is just to be very practical, looking at this from American interests. I do not consent to Xi Jinping holding an economic gun to our head and lording that over for the next 100 years of the future of the United States. But if we're no longer dependent,
the only way that we're going to be able to do this because of China's currency manipulation. So there's the Dubai, man, I don't remember what the name of it is now, but the Dubai currency is pegged to the dollar. It's like 3.98 or something to the dollar. And if the dollar goes up or down, Dubai's currency follows it. China has an interesting way of doing it. They want to make as much money as they can from us. So they don't want to weaken their currency too much against the dollar so that it's too cheap. But they also don't want to let their currency get too strong against the dollar, because then American manufacturing becomes competitive against the Chinese yuan. So if it's no longer profitable to ship the raw materials all the way across the Pacific, manufacture in China, and then ship the finished product all the way back to America, and do that more cheaply than an American factory can produce it paying American workers, then he's good. But as soon as that becomes more expensive, because now their economy is doing well, and let's say ours has gone down, we stop doing that and start manufacturing here. So they make sure to manipulate their currency right in that sweet spot where they're not getting ripped off, but they're also not expensive enough so that we don't use them to manufacture absolutely everything. So the only way to combat and defeat that type of currency manipulation is going to be putting tariffs on Chinese imports to make American manufacturing competitive. Because these companies, as much as they virtue signal, a corporation only cares about one thing, and that's money. When they virtue signal, when they care about the environment, when they care about, the rights of certain groups, they're only doing that because they think it's going to be financially beneficial to them. So the only language that they speak, the only thing that they understand is money. So if you want their behavior to change, if you want them to manufacture in the U.S., then you have to make it you have to financially incentivize them building factories here, training the workforce here, because right now they're just building Chinese infrastructure and training Chinese workers. And tomorrow, if they wanted to kick us out, they could say, okay, Apple, Tesla, all you guys, we're putting you on planes, you're leaving all your stuff here, all the materials, all the finished goods, they're ours, and we're kicking you out, all of you. There are factories now. Now we produce iPhones. We own all the IP. We can do whatever we want. You're gone. And that is coming. But they're not going to do it before it's the right time. They're very strategic, and they have a singular focus. They have a 40-year vision. They have a 40-year plan because they keep the same leader, whereas we change leaders. And our leaders are like just focused on undoing what the previous guy did because he thinks differently than I do, and I don't give a shit about America. I only care about myself and my party and the beliefs that I want, and I'm going to shove it down everybody else's throat. That's the world we live in, and it's absolutely beautiful, It's so beautiful what America has become. The amber waves of grain and the endless fighting of political parties, and by extension the people in the streets who think that they should support these people. You shouldn't support these people. These people are ruining the country, and you're going along with it is helping them.
On that tiny island nation, then I will not send our sons and daughters to die over somebody else's nationalistic dispute.
How
That's what I'm
difficult is it to produce? I mean, it's interesting, and you said there's a complex history that I'm not familiar with behind it, but how complex is it to build your own semiconductor?
It's complicated because a lot of it relies on know-how. So it's not just raw production capability, but it's the know-how of how you actually make it. And so I think that requires pulling.
It's extremely complicated. We're down to like 4 nanometer processes, and you're also starting to separate chips because electricity jumps. You've seen a big transformer malfunction, and electricity, if you got enough voltage, will jump an air gap. Well, you get the same thing when you get below a certain size in the process. So that's why you now have 8-core chips as opposed to 2-core chips, because they're getting so small that they have to create separation, and so they have 8 small chips instead of it all packed onto one die. So you're not just talking, you're talking clean rooms, you're talking specialized equipment, and you're talking know-how. This is a monumental task. And the lead time on the factories that were already being produced when you had the GPU shortages during crypto's boom a couple of years ago are like 3 to 4 years to build one of these factories. So this is why the prices on GPUs were skyrocketing, is because, yeah, there were plants already being built, but they were still 2 years away from completion. It's not just building a building. You got a lot of specialized equipment that is custom ordered and custom built, because oftentimes they're trying to get to a smaller size process. So even some of the older factories are not equipped to build the newest chips. We cannot underestimate how complex this is. Semiconductors, when you're getting down into that, superconductors, when you get down into that size, are highly, highly precise, and computers build it. Robots build these.
People from, TSMC in Taiwan to the United States. And I think that that's something that we should be intensely focused on right now. There's new, giant projects, manufacturing projects in Arizona, near where I live, actually in my home state of Ohio, that are going to be steps forward in that direction. I also think that, like it or not, a relationship with South Korea and Japan is going to have to play a role in speeding up our semiconductor self-reliance as well. Samsung is the next best leader. It's not even an American company. After TSMC, there's like a big jump down. Then it's Samsung. Then there's a big jump down. There's Intel and everybody else here. So I think that it's going to require, and I don't like multilateral trade agreements, but if we're going to have to do them, let's keep it bilateral. Bilateral agreements with Japan, with South Korea. That's a big part of what's going to be required. And so my view is, let's think about first term in office as it relates to this dimension of foreign policy. End the Ukraine war on terms that help pull Russia out of China's hands. That's going to require rebuilding a lot of trust. I think I'm up for that job. And I believe that Putin can trust us to follow our self-interest as long as we trust him to follow his. Reopen economic relations with Russia, freeze the current lines of control, make a permanent commitment that NATO will not admit Ukraine to NATO. But in return, weaken, if not disband, that Russia-China alliance. I'd get India back on side. And, if there's a guy who's going to rebuild trust with India, it better be a guy with the name Vivek Ramaswamy, who might be up for that task. But, getting India on side to say, we're going to be making sure that in a conflict situation in Taiwan, that we're at least on side with the United States. But then more importantly, get semiconductor self-sufficiency in the United States, reduce our economic dependence on China. If we're there by the end of my first term, by the end of 2028, the stakes are now just a lot lower with respect to what's actually happening in Taiwan. And if, is it preferable for China to annex Taiwan even after that scenario? No, probably not. But that's a different bar for whether or not we're going to actually be willing to send our sons and daughters to die over it. And in the meantime, there's one aspect of our national defense that surprisingly nobody's talking about, Tucker, which is actually our national defense of the homeland, where we have actually badly missed the plot for super EMP attacks, cyber attacks, nuclear defense. We helped Israel build an Iron Dome. How about an equivalent of an Iron Dome for the United States and our own homeland? And so that's where I'm focused in my first term. On foreign policy, if I can get us to semiconductor independence, if I can get us to significantly reduced, if not total economic independence from China, weaken the Russia-China alliance by ending the war in Ukraine, that actually keeps China at bay from not having an economic gun to our head over our modern way of life, at which point we then have a different set of commitments where after that, we're going to be in good shape no matter what happens. And so I wasn't, planning to get into some foreign policy detour, but that's the way I'm thinking about the first term.
All of that makes sense.
You think so?
Well, I'm not sure what is controversial about any of that.
Well, I think what's controversial about it is they say
how
it's weak.
Far those priority. It's weak.
That's what I've heard yesterday. Yeah, I mean,
from whom?
Well, from a lot of Republicans actually. And
is there a dumber group? I mean, than the foreign policy Republicans? I mean, I'm not talking about Republican voters. I mean, the members of
strength and bravery, unless you know what you're doing, is the same thing as stupidity. So we all know those people who have more balls than brains. And with foreign policy, now going off a ramp with a dirt bike, hey, you're only going to hurt yourself, buddy, so send it. But when it's a potential World War III with Russia, being, strong and being aggressive, not really the way you want to start off. You start off with diplomacy and conversation, and hopefully you can work things out like that. You don't go straight to, oh, that's weak, should just blow them up. We could deploy a tactical nuke and everything would be great. Like, we just blow up Moscow, they wouldn't retaliate. We take them out, cut the snake off, cut the head off the snake, we're fine. Then we've only got 10 warlords that all have access to nukes. It's a great plan. Push the button. No.
The Congress, the low IQ guys from, including your state, I hate to say it, Texas, who make their entire career about seeming strong and quoting Reagan, and under whose watch the country has become demonstrably weaker.
It has become, and that
doesn't lead to strength, actually. Where are we now?
And the funny part
with
is
our transgender army, like seriously.
Well, people also miss this, Tucker, and this makes people uncomfortable as they get very upset when I say this. I think there's a chance that if we enter war with nuclear allied Russia and China, the United States as we know it, we may take a risk of it ceasing to exist.
Of course.
Okay, I'm glad you appreciate that. That's good, because many people are like, what are you talking about? The United States ceased to exist? No, I actually think...
Well, in a nuclear conflict, yes.
Well, because we don't have nuclear defense capabilities.
No.
You know, national defense has not been about defense for a very long time.
Right.
And so, by the way, super EMP capabilities take out our electric grids. We have, 60 Chinese transformers that are in the midst, nodes in our own electric grid. They could shut down our modern way of life with that. You want to talk about actual cyber attack capabilities? We're better on offense. We have no defensive capabilities. And so, when I think about a modern foreign policy vision, I'd revive a modern Monroe Doctrine. You don't mess with the United States on our own soil. We are not okay with a Chinese spy balloon flying over half our country. We are not okay. We do not consent to a Chinese spy base off the southeast coast of the United States or in Cuba spying on the southeast corridor of the United States. We're not okay with intentionally pumped fentanyl, the raw materials literally coming, I'm not making this up, from Wuhan to Mexican drug cartels that are intentionally being pumped across our southern border as part of really a one-sided.
China's the #1 producer of fentanyl, and I know that you can't say this, but it comes from China. China.
Opium war. No, we're not okay with that, or with interference in the Western Hemisphere, or with China having control over the Panama Canal, something that people forget as well. No, we're not okay with that, but that is also our top priority. Protect the homeland and the interests of citizens here at home. That is how America is strong and actually leads on the global stage. And so the irony is, at least like the Reagan version of this was, yes, all of that projection peace through strength, but strategic defense initiative, nuclear defense here at home. Now we're in the worst of all worlds, where you have a generation of people who vaguely remember the slogans and feel like they want to puff their chest but can't really do it super confidently, so they're like doing it as like a second language. Well, altogether, forgetting about the actual defense of the homeland, it's even worse, because the peace through strength part, well, the strength part actually provokes that which we're not even prepared to handle back at home. So I end up talking to a lot of neocons, actually, in terms of, bolstering me up, because they don't have the right strategic vision, but they know all like the names of.
I didn't know what this was either, but neocon is neoconservative. Keeps getting thrown around. I think it's just a buzzword. I'm not sure how much it actually means. Oh, and this is a 5 days ago. This is an article in Reuters, and hypersonic missiles are specifically the ones that what's our thing called, star space thing, the defense grid that can shoot down missiles, whatever it's called. It can't compete with hypersonic missiles, so that's why they're putting the hypersonic missiles on there, is because they cannot we can't defend against them. So it's a surefire way to hit us if they launch.
Of like, what an Ohio class SSGN versus SSBN is, and I don't know these things.
All the war porn, they love that.
I mean, I wasn't born with this knowledge, but I'm going to be U.S. president.
Yeah.
I better darn well and trained to know it. And so I'm probably talking to more liberal hegemony neocon people training me, not because I'm taking their views. I deeply disagree with them, but they, know the lexicon. And so, I want to put myself in a position where it's easily dismissible. This guy doesn't know what an Ohio class SSGN versus a SSBN is. Well, okay, well, now I do, it turns out. It took all of about 30 minutes to get that one under our belt. But it doesn't matter. You're missing the plot if you're actually failing to actually advance.
Is there a single neocon with a happy personal life? Like, imagine.
I haven't drilled into it.
Dinner at Bill Kristol's house, the misery. Do you know what I mean? Like, it does seem like, I don't want to psychoanalyze here, but it does seem like their project has nothing to do with helping the United States in any way.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's super simple. SSBN is ballistic missile Ohio class submarine, which is the big boys, and then the SSGN is cruise missiles. So we all know now, this guy's not special. I could be president. I know what it is.
It is psychosexual or something. They're for war. As long as other people fight it. I mean, it's like a syndrome. I've never seen anything like it.
There is a certain derangement you see when they're using words like Virginia class this or Ohio class that or Tomahawk spacing. There's a certain type of satisfaction.
If your wife respected you probably wouldn't have to talk that way. So no, I think everything you said is self-evidently sensible, and it's hard to. By the way, if you took a poll on what you just said, your defense priorities as you just articulated, I can't imagine you get under 90% for that. Like what? How could you disagree with that?
But I haven't taken a poll. But it'll be interesting to find out.
It's so obvious.
If I'm wrong, maybe I'll get wiped out in the election. And
I
okay
want to play, and you're busy. You got to go campaign. But I just want to play one. I want to play a soundbite, a SOT, as we say, from you on the campaign trail. This is an exchange, which I think just says a lot, where you're approached by a self-described pansexual. It's just a beautiful answer in so many ways, but I just want to parse your initial answer. 3 parts about it I love. She comes up and says, what are your opinions on the LGBT community? First, you question the premise of the question itself. How is it a community? Trans is fundamentally in tension with gay, as you say. That's not a community.
I agree with that.
Second, you're completely calm and you explain yourself. And third, you say, what's your opinion?
Yeah.
And you throw it back to her. But to the first thing, trans is fundamentally in tension with gay. I have not heard anybody say that in public. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's just starting with the L and the G. Most lesbians don't like gay men.
Trans are insulting cis lesbians. I mean, this is. I just watched this the other day. A trans female, so they were originally a male, who's now a woman, talking shit to gay females. Entitlement. Good God, I'm going to usurp your gender identity, and then I'm going to criticize you now that I'm part of your group. It's just crazy. I don't get it. Like, I don't get why this is acceptable. Why it's acceptable in one direction. Because if the cis lesbian was criticizing the other way, nobody would side with them. It's a war of who's more oppressed, and only the most oppressed is allowed to speak. So if we follow this, an eye for an eye leaves everybody but one guy blind, So as soon as you open up the door to stupid shit like this, it harms everybody. And you think that it's protecting you now, but wait until the double trans, triple species divorced from human, I'm a fox turtle and I'm trans. I'm more protected than you. Now you don't get to talk. Now I criticize you and you have to just take it. No, just stop it. Just do your thing. No one cares. Do your thing. You want tolerance? Fine. But don't push things down other people's throat and then wonder why people are mad.
And vice versa. But then now you keep adding.
I don't think you can say that. It's too true.
And you sort of like further start playing this out.
Right.
Trans is this totally weird separate thing. That's like, so like, you're just like mashing this like alphabet soup just to create an us versus them destruction of modern order.
Sorry, I should say I someone in the studio is nodding. Who would know? What you just said is true.
It's the truth. I mean, really. And so the truth is, let's just take, I mean, we could have a lot of fun with this one, but just take some of the suppositions here and see if this logically makes sense, right? Like one of the suppositions in the gay rights movement, which, I'm totally open to this, but it's just partly of how we created gay rights in this country, is that the sex of the person you're attracted to is hardwired on the day you're born, even though there is no gay gene. Now, if you make it one movement, the LGBT movement, that's the same movement that also now says that your own sex is completely fluid over the course of your life, even though there is a definitive sex chromosome. Like, you can't believe these two things at the same time. They're fundamentally
nonsensical.
It's nonsensical. And so that's what it reveals what's going on, Tucker, is that these are cult-like belief systems, right? Because if it's a religious cult, then you don't have any obligation to logic if you're subscribing to a religion. And the worst religions are the ones that fail to recognize themselves as religions. I think religion can be a great thing. You and I are both pro-religion, pro-faith, if we recognize that we're actually exercising faith. But the most dangerous religions of all are those that claim to be secular but are actually religious in their conviction. And one of the ways you can smoke out that it's a religion is just these inherent tensions. Then you give it a flag, then you give it a symbology, you give it an idol. The first idol was not good enough, the rainbow flag. Then they had to make the trans flag, the upgraded version, the golden idol. They started with the silver one. And
this is a perfect time to discuss the symbol in the corner of the screen. So the worst thing you can do is allow someone to create an icon and associate it with a toxic movement. So if they want to kneel and disrespect America, then I'm going to kneel harder. And my kneeling is in solidarity with America and all true patriots. And I kneel for all the shit that America's taking. I kneel for all the sacrifices that we've made, all the blood that's been spilled to keep us free. I don't care what you're kneeling for. I think we should all kneel for our own movement, because if you give people symbology and you let them have it, then they can create a brand and a movement and get everybody behind it. But if you hijack their symbol, they got to start over. So the easiest way to defeat this stupidity is to lean into it harder than they can, because there's more of us than them. I mean, come on. There's more people that love America than people that are tearing it down and saying this place is a shithole because there's some controversial history along the way. You know, we fought a war. A lot of people died to make people free, everybody free in this country. And I'll be damned if we're going to let it fall apart now after everything we've done. 247 years of freedom in this country. I will be damned if it's going to fall apart on my watch. So I hope there's people out there that feel the same way. I hope people are going to go vote. I hope people are going to stop spending money with these corporations that are virtue signaling right on the packaging. You can tell who you shouldn't give your money to. It's very clear. They're printing it right on the package. So it's super easy for you to know which ones to not ever touch again. And if they change their packaging back, don't you forget. Don't you forget who did this. Don't forget who's virtue signaling to the people that are destroying America. Because they will try to make you forget. Once this falls apart, if we can push back and make things change, they'll be like, oh, yeah, no, we're on your side. Oh, no. That was a false alarm. That was an accident. We fired that guy. Now we're a different company. No. Run them out of business.
And so this is what this is about, is a form of idolatry in the trans flag that is a symbol of a broader religious conviction. It's kind of the same thing you see in the climate movement, actually. Is like, I kind of enjoy this because you get to the bottom of what's going on by exposing the illogic of it. Right? Like on the climate, there's a parallel for what's going on with LGBT with climate. You think two different issues. What are you talking about? Well, the same people who are antithetical to carbon emissions here in the United States are perfectly fine with shifting those carbon emissions to China, even though it was supposedly global warming that we're addressing. Or the same people who are hostile to carbon emissions are also hostile to nuclear energy, which is the most productive form of carbon-free energy production known to man. Again, you can't believe both of those things at once unless you're subscribing to a broader religious worldview.
Yes.
And I think that religion is actually, it's the same religion, whether it relates to the climate dogma, whether it relates to LGBTQIA plus-ism, whether it relates to racial wokeism. It's a broader vision that defines itself in opposition to the American vision, to the American way of life, that says we are individuals who are members of these units we call families which are embedded in the substructure of this thing we call a nation, and a nation which exists under the broader blessing of God. Individual, family, nation, God, that is one worldview. And the thing we're describing here is an alternative worldview grounded in race, in gender, in sexuality, in climate. And one of the things that I feel for some of the people who subscribe to this religion, I somewhat felt for this woman, right? She wasn't, there are others like her. There's another one actually at the Iowa State Fair who had similar beliefs that did not comport him or her or they self, whatever this individual was, in the same civil manner that this woman did. He had a cowbell and it was ringing and was antithetical to having conversation. This woman, at least having a conversation, I kind of felt for her because what I saw in her eyes was She's not an evil person who's trying to be a crusader for some faith to put the other side out of business. Those people exist. She was just lost, actually. Right? I don't know if it was harder to see on the camera, but I was face to face with her. And when I see that, it's why I also thanked her. I said, thank you for being civil in your exchange. And I'll give you the same courtesy in return. I mean, she was early 20s, best my guess. She's lost. There's a void there.
Yeah.
Right? So I asked her the question back. There's a blank stare you get in a response. It's almost the same blank stare as if I ask most young people on a given day, what does it mean to be American? It's that same blank stare. That's the void. It's like a deer in the headlights. And I think that this is our moment, our duty, our job as leaders. It's the job of the next U.S. president, might be the most important one of all, to fill that void with an answer to the question of, what does it mean to be an American? What does it mean to be you? What does it mean to be an individual rather than riding a tectonic plate of group identity? What does it mean to be a member of a family, a nuclear family with a mother and a father that by definition brought you into this world? What does that mean? What does it mean to be a citizen of this nation? Not some nebulous, vague global citizen fighting climate change. No, but a citizen of this nation on this land with these ideals.
This is something that everybody should be asking themselves and spending a little bit of time thinking about, because these questions are not something that you should be waiting for an answer for and someone should tell you. This is stuff that as an American, it's absolutely crucial. This is one of the things that's going to hold the country together, is people thinking about this and having an answer for this and understanding why they have pride to be here. And if you don't, then find somewhere that really aligns with your values. I'm going to read a comment that was left on the channel on a video I posted. My friends on the right want to live and be free. My nephew is a Communist Party member and told me he wants me and others on the right in camps. He's not alone in his movement, and it is a small movement. Being an American to me means pushing back and not allowing that type of shit in this country. Now, I've got no problem with someone wanting to be part of a communist nation, but you know what? They exist already. Go emigrate to one of those places and try it on for size. Don't be coming on my doorstep and taking a shit on my porch. It's not a bathroom, okay? You go to the bathroom when you do that. So same thing. You're not bringing communist shit into this country. This was founded on a whole different set of principles. If you prefer communism, then go try it out, and you're welcome back when you realize that place sucks, you know. But you're gonna have to go through the process to get back in. And that's another thing. Instead of saying no immigrants, this is how they win the argument. Okay, the right says, you know, no. We need to close the borders. We should be saying we need to close the borders and improve the legal immigration process to allow people. We need people to come in. We want them to come in legally. We want them to be vetted. So let's make the process more efficient. And then they can't argue that we're racist and we don't want people from other countries in here. We're xenophobic. No. We're not xenophobic. We want immigration. We want to bring them in legally here. They are leveraging open borders into illegal immigrants voting for their party. If we could provide a legal avenue, we could take the votes of immigrants away from them, because immigrants could legally come in the country. They could legally vote. They are legal citizens because they followed the process, and they would rather vote for the party that is not running America into the ground. The only reason they're voting for them is because they're in favor of illegal immigration, and that's how they got in the country. Provide an avenue for them to come in legally. They will do it, and then they will vote for the party that improved the legal process of them coming into the country. You can turn it around on them. You just need to outthink them. And they're so angry and pissed off and illogical that people with brains should easily be able to run circles around them and their ideologies. You know, it's not logic. It's entrenched religious fervor, exactly how he's saying it. I mean, he's laying it out almost flawlessly, for real.
What does it mean to believe in God, to be a nation under God? I think that's our moment. And I believe that if we fill that void with an actual affirmative vision, we will dilute these other poisons to irrelevance. They are symptoms. They're symptoms of a deeper cancer.
100%.
That cancer itself is a void, a black hole. Fill that void with an actual affirmative vision of who we really are. That's got to be how we win. And the thing that frustrates me most, actually, about the Republican Party, Tucker, isn't even, the neoconism in our foreign policy. And I mean, it frustrates me deeply, but this feels solvable through an alternative set of policies, right? I can go do deals on a global stage, and let's hope I'll be successful if I'm in that seat. I think I will. But this is actually the deeper challenge. You can only stand up with the spine abroad or in an economy or whatever if you at least first know who you really are. And I think that is the far more difficult question. It's not going to happen through policy, but somebody. It doesn't have to be a U.S. president. It could be, it could be someone who has a media outlet. It could be a religious figure, but it could be a parent. Maybe it's not one person. Maybe, which is what I think the real answer is going to be. Maybe it's going to have to be leaders in the different spheres of our lives, each stepping up and speaking with conviction to the question of answering who we really are. And I think the U.S. president has a role to play there in answering who we are as Americans. And the thing that really frustrates me back about the Republican Party is, I wrote Woke Inc. a couple of years ago. You were kind enough to help me launch that book with you, and we had a great conversation, and a lot of people read it. And then the Republican Party starts reciting memorized chapter and verses from, not just my book, but maybe others like it, but mine included, but without actually knowing what they're even talking about. They understand the word, they're uttering the words, but they don't really understand the phenomenon they're addressing, which stops you from actually getting to the true solution, which is actually understanding that there's a deeper void and vacuum that we have to fill with an affirmative alternative vision of our own. That takes courage. That takes vision. That takes some level of imagination of what is actually possible. You don't have to imagine it too much. It's been true for most of our history, so you can maybe just draw from that. That's how I do it. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. Let's maybe just borrow from the people who set this thing into motion. They had a pretty good idea of what they were doing. But that's what this moment calls for. And either we rise to that occasion and we take that 1776 spring spirit and we channel it into a revival of that once more, or else we will be the Israelites lost in the desert asking to go back and be ruled by the Pharaoh. And that's exactly what this nation is otherwise on a march to actually towards being ruled by, quietly becoming a people of sheep so our government can be a government of wolves.
That's a perfect analogy. Vivek Ramaswamy, thank you very much. Good luck at the debate.
Thank you.
What the heck is going on now? Brilliant. This guy, I have become a huge fan. This is what America's about. Don't get caught. Don't get caught up on one person. Keep your minds open and listen to what these people are saying, and also think about how you can affect change. Don't just be reliant on someone else doing something, because that's working terribly. Relying on these people, even the people that have the best intentions supposedly and speak so eloquently about what they're going to do, that's no guarantee that they're going to be able to affect the change that they claim they can. There's a lot of roadblocks. This is a systemic problem. It's not a problem with one or two elected positions. The whole thing has been infected, and you've got problems in the education system as well. There's a lot of things, but we can't tackle everything at once. We can't let ourselves get overwhelmed. We have to take it one step at a time and only do what we know that we can. Otherwise, we get overwhelmed and we quit. So, you just have to identify some small things that you can work on, even if it's just talking to some people in your circle. I mean, I know that there's people with family members out there who are unable to talk politics with them. And it's like, I would say that the conversation that needs to start is, how could we agree? Not, how can I convince you of the things that I believe in, or how can you convince me to come over to your side? Where can we find common ground in the middle to start a discussion And how can we build out from there with the understanding that we are all on the same side? You have rich and you have poor, and you have powerful and you have powerless. And there's mostly powerless and poor in this country. And if you're making enemies with other powerless people and other poor people and blaming them for the actions of the rich ruling class, then I really am baffled that you're so lost and in the dark. I hope that we can turn the lights on. I hope that we can see this creeping evil that is driving us apart. I hope that we can come together. You guys are the change that is needed in America. And I hope that we can find it in our hearts to be brave in the face of fear, to be brave in the face of censorship and social ridicule and all the consequences that they try to put out there to instill fear in you and make you stop talking. I hope that we can ignore those things and see the greater purpose that we need to work towards together, instead of just being worried about our side and our team and the division. So, hope you guys have a great rest of your day, afternoon, evening, morning, whatever the heck is going on. You know what I mean? And I'll see you again soon. Keep it poppin'.
I'm not suicidal. I would never kill myself.